I wish everybody well and be safe. And go ahead, Greg. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, everybody should be able to see the agenda. And we'll turn it over to you, Greg.
Eric, are we ready?
Yes, we are good to go. Go ahead.
All right, welcome everyone. The first agenda item under buildings and grounds is the fuel bids. Little update, since we closed since March 13th, we have not been using as much diesel fuel or heating oil, or gas for that matter. And each year during our bidding process, we have to commit to buying X amount of gallons. So I'm happy to report that with the heating oil, which we purchased through petroleum traders, we were able to fulfill our commitment. For diesel fuel, we purchased that from Tally Petroleum, and on Monday I was able to divide up the remaining gallons of diesel fuel that I had committed to, and we divided the delivery between the 4 buildings, and we added the diesel in with the heating oil. So I'm happy to say that we reached our commitment for diesel fuel. The final item is gasoline. We have a commitment, an outstanding commitment to take about 5,000 gallons more of gas. And at this time, our tank is full. It is only a 500-gallon tank. And to date, Tally Petroleum has not mentioned us having to purchase the remaining gallons. So at this point right now, I'm going to just let it ride and see once what happens. Maybe they were able to sell it to someone else. I'm not sure, but they haven't mentioned it, so I'm not going to mention it. If in fact that they come back and say, look, you didn't purchase all of the fuel that you needed to, Sherry has made arrangements in the budget to pay for any remaining gallons that we would need to purchase. Basically, they will take whatever the rack price is at the current time, add us, I don't know how much, 20, 30 cents to that price, and that's how they arrive at what we would owe them yet. So at this point right now, they haven't mentioned it, and I'm not going to mention it, and we'll just see what happens. If they do come back, we have provisions in the budget to take care of it. And the new fuel bid, the bid opening was going to be the end of April. And with everything going on, they have pushed back the fuel bid opening date to June 11th. So on that day, we will receive the fuel bids. And as we have in the past, Sherry, Rhonda, Matt, and I will take a look at the fuel bids, and with the understanding that we'll take the best deal if there is a good deal, and lock in pricing if it is available. Does anyone have any questions about fuel bids, heating oil?
I have a question. Greg, and help me out. When we get a fuel bid, is that somehow or other tied to, I'm going to use the term a rack price, and that might not be the right term, but with fuel prices, et cetera, having dropped considerably, does that mean we are buying or able to buy our fuel at a lower cost now than we were buying it, or how does that work, Greg? Can you help me with that?
We committed to a certain price that we locked in last year around this time, and I did not see the invoices for the fuel that we received yet. I'm not sure if they gave it to us at a cheaper rate since they are able to buy it cheaper, or if they billed us or invoiced us for our agreed price. So I'm not sure at this time right now what we actually paid for the fuel.
I guess if possible, Greg, and not tonight or whenever, but sometime in the future, if you could check on that or see if there's a clause in there that it's tied to some kind of price, or do you just say we'll pay you $2 a gallon, period, regardless of where it goes? Because I know in the past when the price went up considerably, the companies didn't deliver, and I'm wondering, now that we're in the opposite situation, if we're entitled to any kind of rebate. So at your convenience, no hurry. Thank you, Greg.
I will follow up on that, and I can put something in Matt's slate for Friday. Any other questions on fuel bids? Hearing none, I will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Safe Transport program. That is a computer program that I have for tracking buses, kids who ride buses and vans. It's all transportation software. And our current 5-year agreement ends on June 30th of this year. I ask the Safe Transport folks to propose another 5-year agreement. Currently, under the agreement that we have, which ends in June, we have 18 GPS units on all the full-size buses. The new 5-year proposal that they have provided to me includes an additional 18 GPS units, which would allow Northern Lehigh to put a GPS unit on all the buses and all the vans. The additional cost for the 18 GPS units is $2,700. The agreement for year number one, the total cost for year number one is $12,852. And I have already built this $12,000 into my budget. And also I asked them for a cost of living cap for years 2 through 5, and they said they will cap each year at 1.5%. So the most that the $12,852 could go up next year is 1.5%. Adding these additional 18 GPS units will allow us to track all of the outplaced kids who travel to Lehighton, Palmerton, and down into Parkland areas. Currently, we do not have any GPS units on those buses or vans, so we felt that it was a good time, and they gave us a great deal on adding 18 more units. So with that said, are there any questions about Safe Transport?
Greg, it's Robin. I think it's a good idea that we have all of our vehicles logged. Good job.
Any objections from anyone, any of the board members, to moving this proposal onto the agenda for Monday evening for approval?
This is Gary. Go ahead with it for me.
Do it. Matt said do it.
I'm fine with it as well.
Thank you.
Me too. That's
This
it's
is-
a good thing that we know where our buses are.
Thank you.
This is Gary.
Donna
Yes.
says okay.
Great. It will be moved forward to the agenda for Monday night's approval then. If anyone has any questions down the road, feel free to, give me a call, or I guess not really stop in right now, but give me a call or email.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The last agenda item I have is, and you'll see later this evening where I talk about playground equipment, the Infinity Web out at Peters Elementary. This is the one that everyone refers to as the spider web. I want to put it on the agenda and talk about it a little bit tonight, given the fact that we are not leaving any children use this piece of equipment. and we do not plan to let anyone use it in the next year, when we return next year. If there are any objections to removing this piece of equipment, it would be done in-house, and any items that were able to be recycled, we would recycle for scrap metal. So I just open up the conversation if anyone has any input, any ideas.
This is Gary. You know, I've been thinking about this since we were having the problem, and I think dismantling it is a wise decision. That way, nobody gets on there and uses it without our permission even, and so forth. We can't use it anyway in the condition it is. I would say get rid of it.
This is Robin. I also agree.
Sure. Matt said sure.
Bob agrees.
Donna says okay.
All right, thank you. We will work towards removing it, and if there's any other further questions about buildings and grounds, please give me a call or shoot me an email. That concludes my agenda for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Durr. If we can just pause for a second, I want to verify some of the people that have called in on their phone just for attendance keeping. I believe we have Mr. Fedorcha, whose phone number ends in 20, and Mrs. Culp, whose phone number ends in 82, and then we have a caller whose phone number ends in 12. Is that Mrs. Husak by chance?
Bob Keegan.
Oh, Mr. Keegan, thank you very much. We will note you in the attendance.
Greg, thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, we'll transition into the technology component of this evening's agenda, and I will hand it over to Mr. Hill.
Okay, good evening, everybody. First thing we're going to discuss is the Chromebook and laptop summer plan for this year. Just to let everybody know, first of all, the seniors, what we are going to do is seniors are going to have to turn in their laptops pretty soon before school lets out. And what we are going to do with that is we are going to coordinate receiving their laptops with Mr. Velocity at the high school. And Mr. Velocity still has to go through the lockers and return any of the valuables that the students might have left behind. And what we are going to do is we are going to coordinate receiving the laptops with the high school to try to cut down on how many times students have to come back to the building. So we will be coordinating that and getting that finished by the end of the year. Now, as far as the other students, basically from kindergarten all the way up to 11th grade, we have not made a decision yet. We are waiting on further guidance. At this point, we anticipate that we will be doing a collection to get the laptops and Chromebooks back, but we are waiting on guidance from PDE, from the governor, to see just in case the shutdown for the school gets extended into the fall. We're hoping that doesn't happen, but I am going to wait to make a decision. Wait another few weeks, maybe till the end of May, and then we will make a decision whether or not we are going to have the students return their Chromebooks or laptops. If it looks like there's a possibility we might be out yet in the fall, and again, there's no indications of that, just throwing this out there as a possibility, we will most likely decide to leave the students have their laptops and Chromebooks over the summer, so that way they are ready to go for the start of next year. So that is our plan. Also, the ESY program, we will let the students who are involved in any ESY program have their Chromebook or laptops for those programs as well. So does anybody have any questions on that for the summer Chromebook laptop plan?
This is Gary. That sounds good, Eric. I think it sounds like a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to the next item.
I'm sorry, I should have tapped in earlier. What about the 8th graders who will be 9th graders next year? Is there a need, regardless of whether we go out, for them to trade in their Chromebook for a computer so that they can keep up to date with the high school programs that are being offered? Or will they be all right with their Chromebook if they keep their Chromebooks?
Yeah, what we will do is we will have them keep their Chromebooks temporarily, but we will need to, you are correct, we are going to at some point have to have them come in sometime in the fall if they were to keep their Chromebooks, and at some point we are going to have to do a switch over. I think they can start the year, but we will probably in the first couple weeks in the school, we're going to have to set up a time for the 8th graders to come in and do a swap out to get a laptop. So that is something we will work with the principals to see what the timing of that would be. But yeah, you are correct. That will have to happen at some point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll move on then to our plans for 5th and 6th grade for next year. As you know, right now we pretty much have a one-to-one model throughout our district. But what we're looking to do next year is during the shutdown, Mr. Pine has seen the value of a one-to-one model potentially for Slatington Elementary. And when I say one-to-one model, I really mean one-to-one take-home model. We already have a one-to-one model, but this would be a take-home model. And some of the teachers also expressed interest on 5th and 6th grade that they see that there could be some advantages to having the students be able to take devices home from time to time. Maybe not every day, but maybe, where they would sometimes assign some projects where students would have to take devices home. So what we were looking to do is we were looking to move towards a take-home model for 6th grade to start next year for the Chromebooks. And then we are also looking to roll that down as well into 5th grade. And maybe not start with 5th grade in the beginning of the year, but we will roll that down to 5th grade as the year progresses. We're pretty much already in shape to do that. The only thing that it would really cost extra, and I have money in our budget currently for the upcoming year, we could fit this in. We would have to buy some decent cases like we have at the middle school, what they call always on cases, so that the students could take them home and don't damage their devices. So we are looking to move to a take-home model. There's really not a lot of extra cost involved with that. It's just a matter of getting the cases. And the cases aren't cheap, but we're probably looking at a cost of close to probably just under $10,000 for those cases. But again, I do have that in the budget. That as long as none of our other prices go up that we've been quoted for next year, we do have enough money to cover that in what I had currently proposed for our budget. So does anybody have any questions or comments on the take-home model for 5th and 6th grade?
This is Gary. I don't have a problem.
Okay. And like I said, we will evaluate it as long as our budget, as long as like our costs haven't skyrocketed with anything that we've been quoted on, we'll be fine there. I have that money built in, so I won't be asking for extra money for that. Okay, the next thing is Sycamore International Recycling update. I just wanted to give everybody an update on this. This is the recycling we did. We actually did this on March 13th. That was our last day in school before the shutdown happened. So things got a little hectic. I was expecting a response by now from them. We are expecting approximately upwards to $50,000 for the equipment that we recycled with them. I haven't heard back from them, so I contacted them. And I found out they're basically running a skeleton crew since the shutdown happened, since they were forced to shut down as well. So they're running a skeleton crew right now, but I was assured that our equipment is being processed and we should receive a payment and we should receive some type of correspondence from them within the next couple weeks. So they are working our equipment. I was just told that they literally have a skeleton crew working all through April, and currently they are getting back into business now, starting to get some more people back. So I was told that we will hear something within the next few weeks, and we should be expecting a payment shortly for that. So I just wanted to update everybody on that. Is there any questions on that? Okay, and then one more item. I apologize ahead of time. We added this item later today. It wasn't on your agenda. This is kind of a combination item for Mr. Durr and myself. What we were looking to do is we were actually looking to we're looking to replace projectors at Peters Elementary this summer, and this was a project that we were planning on doing over the summer. But what this project is the way the boards, the way the projectors were installed out there, we have something called a Promethean board, and those boards were actually attached to our current blackboards. Okay, and then they had like a whiteboard coating over top of the blackboard. In order to, the projectors out there are getting rather old, and they need to be replaced. A lot of them are getting blurry. They don't work very well. We had some issues this year. We had to replace a few of them. So we're at the point where they have to be replaced. And again, this was something we were looking to do over the summer. But in order to replace the projectors, we have to remove these Promethean boards from the blackboard. The problem is it leaves basically you end up with two sections of whiteboard with a old blackboard with holes through it in the middle of the board. And that's because these other boards were attached to it. So what we did is we had a company come in called Resurfacing, and they looked at the boards, and what they suggested is that we remove the Promethean boards, we remove the whiteboard coating that's there now, and they will be able to resurface the blackboards with this white coating material, which will make it into a whiteboard. And they will be able to do this resurfacing for us rather than purchasing all new boards, which would be a lot more expensive. And then what we could do is again, this is part of my budget for next year. What we will do is we will replace all those old Epson projectors with the current Promethean boards. We'll replace those with new Epson ultra short throw projectors, similar to what we have at Slatington Elementary, and some of the high school, we put some of these in as well. So we will be looking to replace those projectors. But the first part of this process is we have to get the old boards down and we have to get them resurfaced. So again, this was going to be next year, but there is some money left. And since we have this shutdown, we can actually start doing this project a little sooner out of this year's funds. And then again, it'll save us a little bit off of next year's funds. And then we can get this done earlier. So basically it's pay me now or pay me later kind of a thing. But this is the quote we received from Everrace. The quote is for $11,246.49. That is to do 23 of these existing boards that we have to remove and then repair them and put this coating over. So it would be for 23 of these boards. I'm sorry, to do the whiteboards. And then I will be purchasing projectors over the summer, and we will put the projectors in, and it'll be a brand new setup for the teachers. So what we were looking for is we were looking for the board's support and approval that we could move this forward now and put this on Monday's agenda. That way we can get these, we can get this ordered. I emailed the rep, and he said if we get him a PO, he can get a crew out. We can get this done by the end of the year. That way we'll be ahead of the game. And Greg's guys have some work to do with this as well. They have to go in there, remove the old stuff first, and get it ready, and then the company will come in and finish it off. So, so if does anybody have any questions on that?
Eric, the purchase of the projectors, Eric, is any of that covered through E-rate funds?
No, the projectors, projectors are not through E-rate funds. Projectors are just going to be through the tech budget. They are not an E-rateable item.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So do we have any other questions? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, it's
I
Donna.
think it's a great plan.
Yeah, just clarify again for me, because there's a lot of noise going on, talking. We're going to be able to do that while we're closed down right now? I mean, once we're allowed to go into the building, and do some work, we'll be able to do it over that period. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, exactly. Yes, I contacted the company to see if we could get this done earlier, and he said yes, they could. He could get it. It only takes a couple guys to do this resurfacing work. Our guys will actually go in ahead of time. Our maintenance guys will go in, and they will do the removal that they have to do. And then after they're done, the company can send. It only takes a few people. He'll send a few people out, and they will go in and resurface these boards for us. And he can get that done in a couple of days. And he said yes, if we get him a PO shortly, he said he can have this done by the end of June.
Great. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Eric, it's Donna.
Yes.
Can you tell me how long this product will last that you're going to do on the whiteboard? So
Yes, it has
I
forget, it was 25 year, I think it was. I'm sorry, not 10, 25, 10 year. It has a 10-year warranty attached to it. But they do
Okay,
last.
that's great.
Yeah, they have at least 10-year warranty, and that's for any type of damage to the material itself. And they will come out and replace it up to 10 years. After that, it's on our own, but they do have a 10-year warranty with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
This is
Any
Rob.
other
I have a
questions?
question. I
Yep.
saw on that proposal sheet for the quantity, and did you mention you were going to do 23 boards?
Yes.
And the quantity, what the quantity say, 417?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes, it's actually 23 boards. That's the total feet. They sell it by the feet. So what
Oh,
he
all
did
right.
is, yeah, the rep came out as a very good eye. Yeah, the rep came out and measured. We actually went around and measured every board. We did this a while ago. This was back in February. We went through the whole building and measured every board, checked out all the, every board to see what, to make sure this can be done and make sure it was going to work okay. And yeah, so that's actually the quantity is the feet of material. But it's actually 23 boards.
All right, I see that now with the unit.
Yep.
Liter feet. All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep, great question.
And I would say that if we're able to get that done, start on as soon as we can.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for my section. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you,
just
Eric.
let me- Okay,
Did
Mr.
somebody say
Gibson, so
something?
that concludes this this committee agenda, unless any members have something they would like to bring up for this committee.
Yeah, nope. Just thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Okay. That being said, we will take a minute then to transition to the Finance Committee. Mrs. Bonnick, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you. If you would like to begin with your report, then I'll start to log some of the attendance here. And Dr. Stoker, maybe you can type in the ones that are not listed, pre-populated.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. First, I wanted to say a big thank you to Gail, who gave for our lunches last week. She gave all the candy that was given for the Walnut Port, I guess, parade, the Easter parade, and donated it all to us to give to the kids. So I'm sure the kids were thrilled when they opened up their bags and saw candy, because it's not something that we do with our lunch program, but it really wasn't part of the lunch program. It was a donation from the community, and I thought it was very kind of her to think of us. The food service department was nominated by the Girl Scout Troop 6412 as their hometown heroes. And it rewarded us with 2 cases of Girl Scout cookies. So if anybody's has a craving, please stop by, because you can't buy them anymore. But I'm really proud of the girls and what they've been doing. And one of the things they said is that it's the one thing that stays normal for them right now. Like, they can still get their school meals. So there's just that little piece of normal in their life. So they really appreciated it. And it was a handwritten note and a card from the girls themselves. So if you get to the middle school at all, it's laying on the table for everybody to see. We are at this point.
Mrs. Bonnick, excuse me. Which local Girl Scout troop was that? What was the troop number again?
6412.
6412. I just want to make sure I record it correctly. 6412. Thank you.
Sure. We're also looking into which way we can continue, or how we're going to continue if we want to continue the summer program. We were already signed up to do the summer program, but the state may be allowing us to continue on the program we're currently running. And they are two entirely different programs. One's a summer program, and it's got a whole different acronyms. And the one we're on currently is the Seamless Summer Program. But I reached out to the state and did explain to him that we had already been accepted as an open site, which means that we had already projected that we were going to not only feed camps, but our community. So she is going to check it out for us to let us know which is probably, if the one does happen, which would be the best route to go. But I believe at this point, it looks like we might have the go ahead for doing summer. The only difference is I will need to talk to Matt about the logistics of it, and then we'll further that with at the next meeting, I think. Today, we're trying to be creative now because it is getting harder to get things, but it's kind of getting fun also. We did cheeseburgers for the kids today. Friday, we're going to be doing tacos and salsa and nacho chips. And then next week, we're going to do the breaded Tyson chicken sandwich for them, which is actually one of their favorites. So as we move on, we're trying to get a little more creative on getting foods out. I purchased some foil bags, and we have to give all the directions on how to heat it, whether it's microwave or oven. But so far, it seems like the kids were pretty excited about it. So I'm glad to be able to, still looking out there to see what else we can give them, that they're not getting bored and that we can provide when we are getting shortages by our vendors. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnick. Does anybody have any questions for Sue?
No,
I'd just
Sue,
like to
this
say-
is very, but just please, I don't think we can thank our staff enough for all they do. So please share that with them, that the board certainly is behind them, and we would love to do whatever we can to help out.
I will share with you that they are incredibly pleased with how the board has reacted. I've had so many comments from my girls saying, I don't even care if I have to come in here more days, that they just felt like that they were part of a community that really wanted to help them, and they are more than pleased in what you guys have done for them. So I can't forget to extend that as well to you. But I do continue to, and any note or sign we get, I share with them all. The candy, I did give any of the ladies that had kids, I did allow them to take, some of the candy home with them. So they're happy. They really are. They love coming out and seeing everybody, even if it's a one day and we all have masks and we're not that close to each other, but it's still a day out of home, which is a little bit better for them than staying indoors all day.
Thank you, Sue.
Uh-huh.
At this time, we're going to transition into the presentation of the proposed preliminary budget for the 2020-2021 school year. So in a second, I will be sharing out that PowerPoint on the screen. Mrs. Moltoris will take the lead on that presentation, and then I will interject as we go through the presentation. You can ask questions as we go, or you can ask questions at the end. Okay, Mrs. Moltoris, I will take your direction as to when you want me to advance the slides.
I don't see the slides right now. Matt, are you sharing them?
I thought I was. Bear with me here a second.
Now you're sharing them.
You can see them?
No, I can't, but I could tell
No.
you're trying to share them.
Yep, hold on 1 second here. Stop. Are you able to see that?
For about 2 seconds, and then it went away. Oh, there it is. No, it's gone. There. Okay. Nope, gone.
It may be loading. Hold on.
Okay. Okay.
Can you see that?
I can see that. And then I
Right.
was seeing full screen then as well. So I don't know if you want to go back to full screen.
Oh, I'm going to try a full screen one more time. I have a feeling I may have to share it from this screen. But let me try one more time.
That's fine. Yep, that's fine. Yeah. Oh. Nope, it
Anything?
keeps popping in and out. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share it from this one.
Yep.
Yep. How's that?
That's fine.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, everybody who was able to sign on tonight. Greatly appreciate it. This is our first look at our 2021 budget. Please remember that on Monday evening, we will approve our proposed preliminary budget, but that we can change that up until the end of June whenever we pass our final budget. We are going to continue to proactively look at ways that we can continue to reduce our budget as much as possible. And I believe I did email a copy of this to everybody today. I'm hoping everybody was able to open it and review it. But Mr. Link is showing it here so you can follow along as well. So some of the things that we need to consider is actually, what are these long-term closures looking like for our district? And we're not talking just school, we're talking businesses, we're talking our taxpayers in our community and what is happening to them, what they're going through. Basically, we've been building a budget since November, December, and mid-March, all that went out the window because everything changed when COVID-19 hit. So we need to start all over again. We started again in April, adjusting numbers, adjusting what we could do, looking at what the 2021 school year would look like, and then what will the long-term budget implications? What is this going to cause in future years, 21, 22, and beyond? So this first slide, COVID-19 effects during the year. So basically, our school closures began March 13th, and they now, as we all know, are through the end of the year. A good positive thing that did come out of Act 13 is that all employees are being paid as if COVID-19 did not occur, and we are in agreement with that. All of our employees are currently being paid as if they were not, as if COVID-19 didn't happen. And the Board of Education had approved that happen prior to it even being a state mandate. So kudos to you for putting your employees first. It was definitely, it's sent. I think that's why you have the cafeteria staff reacting the way the cafeteria staff is reacting, because they knew that if you weren't forced to do it by Act 13, you were still going to do it, which is a very positive for our community and our staff members as well. Funding opportunities that are coming out of this. We have the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. It's $3 billion. $50 million of that has to be earmarked for K through 12 education. And then federally, we have the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, which is $13.5 billion. The other day, it was just released that $523.8 million the governor has applied for, and that 90% of that has to go to school districts and charter schools. But there is possible language implications to our school district. The language in that agreement says that we basically have to pay all of our staff members if COVID-19 didn't happen, which we currently are doing. The other part of that says, shall to the greatest extent practical, continue to pay our contractors during this period as if disruptions or closures related to coronavirus. Currently, we are not paying our transportation subsidy, which has been or our transportation provider, which has been a huge conversation amongst all of the business managers within Lehigh County and the consortium that we're in. Our contract currently does not guarantee him any number of days. So we are trying to negotiate a fair price with him. He did receive the PPP loan, which is the personal paycheck protection plan. He did receive that. So we are now still continuing to negotiate that with him. So currently, as the end of year expenditures, I do not have us paying anything, but I have us taking a $300,000 hit in our subsidy next year, because we will take about a $300,000 hit in our subsidy if we don't negotiate with him through the end. So we're still working through the process of that. I didn't put it in as an expense this year, but I didn't put it in as a revenue this year. So it's kind of like Eric said later, it's pay me now or pay me later. So if we end up negotiating an agreement with him, I'm going to receive that revenue next year. So that's going to be something that we're going to see change in this budget by the end of June if we're able to come up to an agreement with Mr. Gross with his contract by the end of June. So another thing is the savings on the fuel. Of course, we have heating oil, diesel, gasoline. Mr. Durr talked to you about the contract commitments that we had and the issues with that. He is correct. The gasoline is the only one that's hanging out there. I still have that in the budget as if we would need to pay that. That money is still there. If not, then we are to the good in that area. The next thing is the online learning. So we didn't have much of a cost to the district with online learning because we already had our high school and secondary level was all currently already taking home their laptops and their Chromebooks. The elementary level, then we opened it up obviously to our elementary level because we did have one-on-one happening at the elementary level. We just weren't allowing them to take them home. So we did not need to buy new equipment for them. The only thing we needed to buy new equipment for were the Kajits, the hotspots, for those families within our community that could not afford the wireless internet. And in order for the continuity of education, we had to find a way to get them the internet. The hotspots, we did receive the CEEG grant for $5,000. So there was a little bit of a cost increase to us for the additional Kajits that we have, but we do have some on hand in case any other families do feel the need for them. So that we can continue on with that continuity of education. So our other potential savings we can look through is our substitutes. Of course, when we went out as of March 13th, which was the Friday, was our in-service day. We are not going to have any substitutes probably through the end of the year because all of our teaching staff is continuing to teach on. I even have we did have a few maternity leaves that would have been factored into this. They received notes from their doctors that as long as they are able to continue to work from home, they can continue to work. So we would have been paying them plus paying substitutes. Now we're not paying the substitutes. So they are all willing to continue on in their capacity. And for continuity of education, it's probably best for the students if their regular teachers are teaching that core subject area anyway. So it's working out in favor on both ends. Supplies, custodial supplies, instructional supplies, things like for your family consumer science, you're not paying those food costs through the end of the year. Your custodial maintenance, your general cleaning supplies, all that stuff has ceased since really March. They came through and cleaned the start. We're going to have a big cleanup once we're released to come back in, but nobody's been in these buildings, so they're not cleaning on a daily basis. Top of it, we're not using the toilet paper. We're not using the paper towels. We're not using those consumables that get used on a daily basis. So there is some savings there. And of course, our utilities. Now, we did have that ESCO project, and our costs are down because of the ESCO project, but they're also down even more now because the buildings are not being occupied and the electricity and systems are not being used at 100% had the buildings been totally occupied. So we are going to see a little bit of savings there as well. You can advance, Matt. So COVID-19 and effects on our food service department. So Sue kind of was talking to you a little bit already about the food service department and where they stand. If you remember back in 2009, before Sue took over, our food service department was in a real deficit to the general fund. Since that point in time, the general fund has not supplemented Sue at all. She has been a self-sustaining part of the district, and she funds herself, and she fully funds herself. So the positives coming from Act 13 for her is, again, all of those employees are currently being paid. The continuation of the lunch is 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's a plus to our system. It's a plus to the students in this community who the only hot meal or the only meal they may get a day might be the one that they get when they step foot in our doors. So the fact that we can continue to offer them, continue to feed all kids between the age of 18 and younger is wonderful, because these are kids that may not be otherwise eating if we were not offering this program. And then we also have that backpack program over the weekends that also keeps those kids fed over the weekend as well. All those are being reimbursed from the state through the lunch subsidy program, and the federal state through the federal lunch subsidy program. So Sue is receiving some revenues back, but there are, of course, a little bit of negatives with this.
Sherry, if I can just add in there, for the backpack program, that's actually coming from mostly private donors to support that program in particular.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Matt.
Sure thing.
And negatives, incurred costs for the food and paper supplies. So again, she's needing to have paper supplies and stuff, more paper supplies than what she ever needed before. And then her food costs. So on a regular day, every student has the option to put 5 items on their tray. Most of the times the kids come through and they say, I want this item, that item, and that item. So they're only taking 3 items. She literally is in that bag putting all 5 items. So that's an additional cost. What would have sat upstairs as 2 additional items not taken, she could have used later on in another meal program later on that week. So she is pushing more food out than what she would have had the kids actually walk through the cafeteria line, which then again is more of a cost. And then there's lost revenues. She is losing revenues on a daily basis because of her a la carte sales, her minor catering that she does, and less overall participation. So again, she's got 500 and some kids. We have a district full of 1,600 kids. She's serving well over 500 kids in a daytime. So she is losing revenue as well on top of this. And we kind of did a snapshot look at the month of November to see what her expenses, her revenues, her payroll were, and then where she stood with how much she earned. She was averaging about $400 a day extra in revenue, but that was the month of November. Every month is different depending upon the food that she's putting out, depending upon if it's something the kids like pizza, versus something they don't like liver. I'm not saying Sue delivers liver, but I'm saying if they do, her lunch, it would be down. The kids wouldn't buy it. So November was based on, a good month. Not all months may be the same. So any questions on that? All right, Matt, you can advance. So COVID-19 affects beyond the 2021 school year. So what's it going to look like 21, 22 and beyond? Back in February, the Independent Financial Office, the IFO, comes out with their projections for the weighted index for Act 1 for the next 4 to 5 years. They projected over the next 4 years to be at a 3.6, a 3.8, a 3.9, and a 4.0. That's never going to happen. The Act 1 index is based on our SAL, which is the statewide average weekly wage, and our ECI, the employee cost index. People are not working. So the statewide average weekly wage is going to go down, and the employee cost index is going to go down. We looked back to what it looked like in 2008, 2009, when that recession hit. It was really about 2 years till we started to see the real ramifications for that. Prior to at 8-9, we were at a 2.0, 2.4 the following year. It dropped then to a 1.4 and a 1.7. So we are definitely going to see a decrease in this Act 1 index. Just don't know how far it's going to fall, but it's definitely going to fall. And then there's also implications with PCERS. So PCERS, as you know, we have a contribution rate that we must pay every year. June 30th of 19, they projected our rates for the next 5 years, and they're listed there on that sheet that you can see. The issue is that they're basing it on a 7.25% market rate of return. They are never going to see that kind of market rate of return right now. If you know anything about the market right now, it is tanking. It is tanking because on the one side, you have interest on loans is at a 0. You can't have interest loans at 1s, 2s, and 0s and have interest on investments at 2s, 3s, and 4s. It's not going to happen. The one needs to offset the other. So therefore, basically, we're seeing nothing on our return on market for investments right now. So PCERS is not going to see the kind of 7.25% return that they're thinking. So these, we suspect probably in the next couple of months, they're going to come out with all new numbers. And well, they do it in June. So I think once June 30th hits, we're probably going to see a reset of all these numbers, and they're going to come in higher than what they're projected at right now. So that's where we stand with that. You can pop to the next. Anybody have any questions on that before we move on? All right, go ahead, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our district profile as it relates to student enrollment. You can see our numbers from the current school year back to the 17-18 school year per grade level. And then the last column are our anticipated numbers for the 2020-2021 school year. And I have those all in red because, you know, we know that first grade through 12th grade is going to be pretty close. We just advanced the current grade level up a year. Incoming kindergarten class is the wild card class right now. I believe last time I talked to Mr. Schneider, right, we have, I think about approximately 40 families that have gotten their, their information into us through the new electronic system. Now, obviously, we know we're going to have more than 40 families. We just don't know how high that number is going to rise. So we put it in at last year's number, knowing that that would not be an increase in staff or a decrease in staff for that grade level. We are considering an option of doing kind of like we do for our grab-and-go meal, almost like a drive-through, drop off your packet of information for your son or daughter that you would like to register. So we're currently working on that process as a backup to the electronic submission of the required documentation. Either way, as we get into the start of the new school year and we know which children are actually in front of us, we're going to need to go back and view and verify original documentation there. So this year's kindergarten registration process has its positives and negatives. The negatives are we usually by now we have a much better idea of how many children we're going to have coming through our doors next year in that grade level. The good news is, you know, we've been kicking around the idea about transitioning to an online registration. It's amazing what you can figure out how to do once you realize you absolutely have to do it. And the pandemic has, you know, put us in that reality with several systems around the district. So right now, this is our best guess at numbers for next school year. Any questions on that?
Quick question, Matt.
Sure.
The kindergarten, you're listing that at 120. How much would that have to increase or decrease before it will require a change in the number of staff members that you have? Could we handle 125, 130, or, you know, is there a definitive number there that you can work with?
I would say once, you know, if we get up like, and I'm just kind of floating this out there because there's a number of variables that play into that. But when you have a kindergarten class size that starts to creep up north of 20, it becomes a lot because the children, some of them are coming into us very much ready to learn and engage in an academic mindset, no matter what that may look like for kindergarten. Some of them are coming in with no school behaviors whatsoever. Some of them on top of that are coming in already being identified as having learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities on the spectrum, or many of them we know whether they have an IEP or will have an IEP or not. They're coming in experience all different types of what we now call ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. I would say if at some point that number is getting up, above 20, and we can't spread that out amongst the existing kindergarten classes, we're going to have to come back to the school board and say, we need to look at either reallocating the staff that we have on hand or adding a position. There are no new large developments on the books where we would see a lot of families moving in with school-age children. So I'm not anticipating too much of a spike above that.
I guess my question ultimately was at 120, which is where we've been. What is our class size now? And if we're at 15 per class, then obviously that could increase and we would need to add staff. If we're at 19 and a half, then we're getting pretty close. And do you know off the top of your head what our average kindergarten class is for this year / next year?
I don't have it here in front of me, but Mr. Schneiderite, I believe you're on the line. Do you know off the top of your head what this year's kindergarten class average is?
The classes range from 17 to 19 right now. Those are a little bit higher. And then, of course, as the year goes on, as students might transfer out, that changes. But we were right around 20 at the beginning of the year, and now between 17 and 19 right now.
Thank you, Mr. Schneiderite. So
thanks for that. I appreciate it.
And so, Mr. Green, when in that age bracket, when they start creeping up to 20, 23, 24, 25 across the classes, that becomes a handful.
Matt, I wasn't objecting to going over or staying under 20. That wasn't my point. My point was,
Sure,
what kind of a safety net do we have there? And it sounds like, we could probably go a couple more, but once you start going 125, 130 in that class, you would probably be adding, another part-time teacher there. So it looks like if we started last year at 20, I'm assuming 6 kindergarten teachers. I don't know. So we're probably pretty close to capacity there. Just something that I was looking at.
Yep, absolutely. It was absolutely a good question, and the type of stuff we need to continue to monitor. Okay, so here's kind of more of a visual of our building level enrollments back to the 2016-2017 school year. So all the way back in 2016, Peters was at 326. This school year, we're at 372. Slatington was 490, currently at 461. Middle school was at 248, currently at 255. The high school was at 516, currently at 482. So you can kind of see the trend throughout the buildings. Every year it's not uncommon to have, I guess, what we call a bubble class or two. The class going from 6th grade to 7th grade this year is a larger class, and we're currently looking at options at the middle school to make sure, that the staff there has manageable numbers of students in front of them. The employee profile, again, going back to the 17-18 school year, and you'll see that I have for the 2021 school year that, that's our anticipated numbers. That could change. But for support staff, we're looking to stay status quo from this year to next year at 108. Professional staff, 127.5 to 127.5, although we know that we have had some retirements recently approved. We continue to look at all options there. And as the loading of the courses become clearer for us, we'll know if we have any room to adjust there. Administration would remain from 16 to 16. Total number of employees right now is 251.5. We would anticipate the same next year. However, we know that we're still looking at course loadings. We're still looking to see if we need to replace all positions. And ultimately, we need to come to a final approval of this budget based on the current state of the economy. And we need to see how much, we would need to adjust our budget, which could potentially impact staffing for next school year. So this is an area of the budget. It's the biggest area of our budget, and it's something that we monitor really every day throughout the year, not just during budget time. So prior year's composite data, Sherry's going to discuss this here as we talked about taxes and our adjusted index back to the 2017-2018 school year and exceptions and those type of and the fund balance. So Sherry, I'll hand this back over to you.
Sure. So on the left side on the y-axis, that's in millions of dollars. That's our revenue and our expenditures. And on the left side, it's in millions of dollars on the y-axis, and that is our fund balance. So the blue represents our expenditures every year. The green represents our revenues each year, and then that aqua line represents our fund balance and how much of fund balance we ended up using each year to balance our budget. The 17, 18, 18, 19 are firm numbers. They're the actual numbers that ended in our AFR at the end of the year. 19, 20 is my estimated projections through the end of the year. Keep in mind that some of them, fund balance numbers, we did do one-time purchases. Some of it was, again, like the high school last year, some of the, and even this year, the science labs, some of the technology upgrades that we did. Some of that is included in those fund balance numbers, but there is a portion of those fund balance numbers that was used for basically to balance our budget. So again, back in December, we agreed not to raise taxes over the adjusted index of 3.5%, which we did that through that Act 1 resolution. We are not and did not apply for exceptions for either special ed or PCERS. And I am anticipating that at the end of the year, our fund balance is going to end somewhere around 8.7 million. And that's it. Anybody have any questions on that? All right, Matt, back to you.
Sure. So I'm going to kind of walk us through our recommended action for each building level over the next few slides here. So for Peters Elementary entry, currently we're recommending status quo for support staff and status quo for professional staff. No budgetary increases for materials or programs. We had discussed about upgrading a piece of playground equipment that the board, the members tonight just recommended that we tear out a piece of equipment, which we'll get started on. Right now, we're saying take no action on replacing that piece of equipment. We don't feel at this time that this is the time to add in potentially anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 on a purchase of piece of equipment like that. I think for now we table that recommendation. That's an administrative recommendation to table it. For Slatington Elementary, we're also recommending status quo for support staff and professional staff, and we're recommending no budgetary increases for materials or programs. You'll see a pattern here as we go through the buildings. For the middle school, again, we're looking at no increases for support or professional staff and no budgetary increases for materials or programs. And at the high school, the same pattern. This budget year, we are not looking to expand programs, add in new programs, or increase staffing. We feel that we need to be conservative based on the current state of the economy. Any questions on the building level recommendations related to staffing budget, staffing or materials and programs?
Matt, this is Michelle Martineau. I do have a question.
Sure.
Where does this leave us when you say no budgetary increase for materials or programs, like with Slatington and with the middle school? Weren't we looking at new, I believe, math programs for those buildings? Are we just on hold for that?
Well, those programs, we have already started the process of vetting them and actually getting materials in. So, if the process has already started, we're not ending it. We're just not looking to go out and say, okay, now is the time to add in a science program or, a new health and PE type of program, something like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the ones that have already begun the process through, the curriculum committee and the education policy committee, those we are not looking to put the brakes on.
Okay, thanks. That answers my question. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you. I know, Dr. Stoker, is there anything that you would like to add to that as it relates to curriculum?
Sure, I can discuss that a little further. So in the middle school, we talked about digits going away and that was being sunset, so that we don't have no choice. We had to find a curriculum there, and we have to move forward with something. So there we are looking to move forward with the math curriculum of Eureka. Because of the shutdown, we do have some employees that are currently being paid that we can bring in and are starting to print those materials. So they are currently doing that at the middle school, and so those materials will be printed at quite a reduced cost than if we had to bring somebody in over the summer to do that. At Peters, Mr. Schneiderite has had a pretty in-depth discussion with his faculty relating to, do we want to start Eureka since we may or may not be back to start the fall. I mean, all signs right now are, nothing is closed moving into the fall again, but there's a chance that it could potentially go there. So we did discuss potentially not starting a new curriculum if the students are not in front of the teachers in the classroom, because starting a new curriculum can be difficult, and if we're in a remote environment, it could even be more difficult. So we would continue with the program that we currently have. And actually today, Mr. Schneiderite and I spoke. He's reached out to the rep, and the rep said that our license currently that we use for our math program goes through December. They would actually extend that for free through the end of the year if we needed to. So we have the ability to do that, if we're not back in the buildings. If we are back in the buildings, again, we're still printing those Eureka packets and things for the students and the teachers. And if not for this current coming for 2021, for the year after, we will certainly use those materials. So right now it's still kind of up in the air for Peters. In the middle school, we're absolutely moving forward with that. And Slatington already has it.
Dr. Stoker, if I could just add one thing, just to make sure. We have the license for the Pearson online materials until December. They did not yet confirm that they will be able to extend it, but they did say that they were going to look into that. So I'm still waiting to hear from that. I just want to make sure there was no confusion about that.
Thank you. I apologize.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Once you get word on that, can you share that up with Dr. Stoker and myself, and we'll put it out in the board packet on whichever Friday it happens to come in by?
Of course, and just to let everybody know again, we are planning on, if we are starting with a traditional school year, to start with Eureka, but the idea of continuing the digital license, the challenge was Eureka doesn't necessarily translate very well to an online capacity because it's more of a hands-on math curriculum. So the concern from the teachers was that not having that availability would be a challenge, but they were happy to move forward with Eureka if that was the possibility. So that's what we're looking to do.
Thank you, James. Okay.
Sherry, I have a question, if I could, please. This is Donna. I know we've done the distance learning now, and we have our own Bulldog Academy. Has there been any feedback from anyone about doing a Bulldog Academy versus an in-school model?
I can respond to that.
Yeah.
It's Tanya. So Bulldog Academy, we pay for each of the courses that a student takes in that, because it's not our teachers teaching those courses. They're from outside providers. So every course would have to essentially pay for every single one of those courses for every single one of our students if we were looking to do something like that. If we were looking to do something across our district, fully online, everybody using that type of system, we would probably look to do a certain platform. We currently use Canvas, and we use Google Classrooms across the district in different ways right now. But there are some online tools where we can, fully have our courses within those. We would probably look more for a platform like that than currently the way that Bulldog functions.
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood. It's a lot cheaper than a charter school, but it's not cheaper than actually having them at Northern Lehigh. Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll advance through the presentation. And here are some kind of a deeper dive into some budgetary concerns, which Mrs. Moltores will walk us through.
So these are our budgetary concerns for this coming school year. So of course we have salaries, which is always a driving force in our budget, along with that retirement. Retirement is going up $168,000 this coming year. Medical is also going up this year by $155,000, and that is because this year we went through a restaging process. And I'm gonna throw it over to Rhonda so that she can explain to you what the restaging process is.
We're part of the Lehigh Valley Benefits Consortium, which encompasses all of the Lehigh Valley schools except Allentown, L-Tri-C, LCTI, and IU-21. Part of the arrangement with the consortium is that we share the expenses and increases in our insurances. Every 3 years we restage because there are varying levels of benefits throughout the consortium. And we restage every 3 years so that it more or less levels the playing field so that the more expensive programs aren't being totally supported by the lesser expensive programs. This year was one of those restaging years, and we have one of the richer benefit packages. So just to give you an idea of how it actually shook out, the increase for the consortium as a whole was 4.25%. Northern Lehigh's increase was actually 6.12%. And that is because we have a richer benefit plan than most of the districts. So that's why it was such an increase this year versus other years. We still continue to use rate stabilization fund to offset the increase. We would have been looking at probably about a 12% increase rather than 4.25% had we not used rate stabilization fund. So that's that.
All right, so then of course we obviously see an increased cost in our Social Security because that goes up as salaries go up. We have an increase in tuition. We have more faculty that are taking some more classes now, so we did need to increase our tuition. Charter school is up $250,000. Now, this past year, I budgeted $1.1 million in charter school. We're going to finish the year at about 1.3. So that's up $200,000 than what I had anticipated on being in our budget. So for next year, I budgeted 1.35 in our budget for charter schools. So I did increase it by $50,000, but that's really, I went conservative. But honestly, our regular ed student in a charter school, Donna, in answer to your question, is $13,000 a year. A special education student at a charter school is $30,000 a year. So if we have an addition of one special ed student and one regular ed student, that $50,000 out the window already. But in hopes that we know there are some seniors out there that they're going to be dropping off the rolls, that hopefully there's enough wiggle room in there that we can take on any new children that would happen to go into charter school. Technology is up again 50,000. That's that bump increase that I've been building in each year so that this is the final year for it, so that we can get now money in their budget to do that leasing program to replenish those one-on-ones. LCTI also went up $41,000 this year, but LCTI came back probably about 2 weeks ago and let us all know that Dr. Rushton down there was not happy. He felt he could tell what the districts were going through with this COVID-19 and the issues that they were going to have with revenue flow. They decided that they were going to take what was their excess revenues from the school districts that they have been holding on to for some of their future projects, and they are going to return that back to the district. But they can't give us an exact number on what that's going to be until they finalize their books. So this has happened like probably about 4 years ago. I think we ended up getting like between $26,000 and $30,000 back between from LCTI, from the regular program and the CAP program, because we were still part of the 5-year CAP program thing at that point in time. So what ended up happening is they offset our bill. So instead of taking this bill down by $41,000 because we're not sure if that's what it's actually going to be, I build in a revenue side of it. So I put money in the revenue side that we're going to be getting from LCTI that will offset this $41,000. So if it comes through, we're good. It's an offset. The other side of things is cost reductions. So we have seen our reduction in our electricity. Again, that's because of the ESCO project. We had about $437,000 in our budget. This year, I'm estimating we're going to end at about $260,000. So we could easily cut our electricity budget by $87,000. There's still roughly about a $90,000 cushion in there. And I say that because we had a very light winter and our schools have not been operating at full capacity for 3.5 months. Had that been happening, this number would probably not be, that number would not, that I left in the budget would not be as great. So I kind of left it there for right now. We need to really feel out the ESCO project yet. And again, and see exactly where we're going to stand. We need at least a full year of some kind of a baseline to go on. And I believe it's the end of this year that they were going to give us our set projections that they give us, and that's McClure, on what our anticipated savings would be. And it's going to be kind of hard for them to do this at this point because we haven't been operating for 3.5 months. So it's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't need a little bit of a longer time to finalize those numbers for us as well. Fuel oil is down. As Greg said in the buildings and grounds, he has all of those tanks to max. And also with the ESCO project, the furnaces have been running more efficiently. So we were able to cut $30,000 out of that budget for next year. Transportation, we looked back and it seems like we were always a little bit over on transportation. There have been bus runs, not full-size bus runs, more like van bus runs that have been cut due, some of them were due to homeless. We had less homeless kids that we were transporting this year. So we were able to cut that, as well as house placements. I could cut out placements by about $60,000. What I did notice though is my Bulldog Academy increased a little. And I believe that's because what's happening is as kids are being outplaced, before we're outplacing them in institutions, we're having them start out in Bulldog Academy. And if they're able to make it in Bulldog Academy, that is, as we discussed earlier, a cheaper cost than outplacing the student. So that is what we're moving to try and cut down on our outplacement costs, which is something we said last year at our budget that we were going to look to do this year. And we did do it, and we are seeing a savings in that area. Any questions on budget concerns?
Sherry, this is Michelle Martineau again. The charter school number, is the debate still raging in Harrisburg about that? Or is that on hold too?
I know they're continuing to try and get formulas out there for charter school. I think they're more concerned right now, and the bigger battle is fighting property tax freeze versus the charter school at this point in time. I think if they can get two into a bill, they will try and do that. But I know Pasco and them are more fighting to stop the property tax freeze from the legislature than anything else right now. That's on their front burner.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sherry, Matt Green with a quick question, and it doesn't have anything to do with next year's budget, but was a decision ever made on the payment to charter schools this year? Were we required to make our full payment, or was that relaxed to any extent? I know there was discussion about it, but I didn't hear a final. Thank you.
Yeah, we are, what we had to do is we have to pay all of their students as of, that were enrolled as of March 13th, and that continues to be what is being said right now, and that is all we are currently paying for. It'll be, again, as the discussion was before, and nothing has been said. They continue to say the law says this, that they cannot charge us for these students. We know we have had some students that have entered into charter schools since the COVID-19. So at this point in time, we are not paying for them, and charter schools are not billing them us for them. And actually, a couple of school districts had said that they did have a couple of students who rolled in one of the academies. I forget which one it was, but they actually got a notice from them that said, these students have enrolled, but we will not be billing you because we can't because of COVID-19. So they are aware of it and they are not billing us. And we are proactively checking our bills to make sure we are not paying any new students.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Matt, you can flip. So now we're going to look at the revenue side of things. So can what happened in the past basically tell our future? So local revenue is, as you all know, our largest stream of revenue to the district comes from our local participation and our local help. Business managers throughout the IU and throughout the state are trying to determine where these numbers are going to fall. Where's everything going to shake out? Unemployment is obviously the highest that it's ever been. And will people continue to have the money to pay their taxes? And will they be rehired? Will businesses reopen? What are we going to see on the EIT side of things? So looking at real estate, we went back and we looked at the recession back. Basically, PASBO was saying, go back. You need to go back to that recession in 2008, 2009, see what was happening during that time and see what your collection rate was looking like. So prior to that, we were collecting at about a 93.5% collection rate prior to the recession. And during the recession then, during the actually 11-12 to the 13-14 school year, we were collecting at a 92.6% collection rate. So we actually decreased by almost a full percent. I have built this year's budget with a 1% reduction. We currently are collecting at a 93.75%. It took us from 2013-14 to within the last 2 years to get back up to that 93.5. We actually last year and the year before collected at a 93.75%. So the recommendation is backing us back to a 92.75% collection rate. In doing that, that's a lost revenue of $172,000 in our revenues. Potential tax freeze in Harrisburg. So Harrisburg is out there talking, and you have a legislature who thinks that we have a windfall of money. We're going to get all this money because schools haven't been open, but they're not looking at the revenue side of things and all the money that we're losing because of it. So they're shooting for a tax freeze. They're trying to pass it through legislation. If that happens, we could potentially lose $450,000 in property tax freeze if they freeze our taxes. The other opposite side of that is you have legislature saying, you know what, we can't tie these school districts' hands. Act 1 is in place for a reason. It was put there for them to be able to make a local decision, and we've capped them on how much they can do it. Let's let the local decision be made. So instead, let's look at extending that discount period. So instead of July through August, let's extend that discount period through September. And then on top of it, let's take that face period and end that face period in December. So the face period would go from October through the end of December. So if anybody paid their taxes between July and the end of December, they would never pay a penalty. They would get an extra month of discount, which would be the month of September. If that happens for us and it goes through, we would see lost revenue of about $20,000. I looked at our normal average collection rate in the month of September, and I did a 2% collection rate. We'd lose about $20,000. And I looked at what we were looking at for what we collect in penalty for November and December, and we were looking at about a $53,000 loss in revenues in those areas if they decide to go that route. This route is a more preferable route. PASBO is pushing for this route, as are many, many business managers. It doesn't tie our hands as much as a total tax freeze would tie our hands. So the next one is reduction in our per capita. We do not make a lot of money in per capita. I think I have about $66,000 a year we do in per capita collections. So if they reduce our collections in per capita by about 10%, I'm looking at about $6,600. It's kind of a tax that people like to call is the nuisance tax. And I think it's probably the one that most people will say, the heck with it, I'm not paying it. So So if that happens, we're thinking we might see about a 10% reduction in people who do choose not to pay that at this point in time. And again, if that happens, we're looking at about a $6,600 reduction. Delinquent real estate tax collections. This one is a tough one. I actually talked to Portnoy. The problem is our delinquent tax bills went out the week schools closed. So Monday, March 9th, the bills were mailed. Most of the people probably got them by the Wednesday of that week, and then schools closed on that Friday. So with school closure, as you know, also came closures of businesses, layoffs. So people got these tax bills and now they're also being laid off. So the question now becomes, what happens? Do these people have the money to pay their delinquent taxes? Portnoy has told us that they are not being aggressive with collections at this point in time. They feel that we're going to probably see a slower collection rate than we have, but they said most people really do want to pay their taxes. They don't want to not pay them. They just need assistance in paying them. So therefore, they feel that we're probably going to see a lot more hardship applications than we have in the past, which means it's going to be probably a longer pay period till we're going to see some of this delinquent real estate tax collection back. So could be as far as 22-23 school year till we start to see some of these people making up some of this delinquent taxes. They told me I should estimate anywhere between a 15 and a 20% possible reduction. I split it at 18. That's a loss of $162,000 in revenue to the district. EIT. So EIT, earned income tax, unemployment is not locally taxed, and therefore our EIT tax collections are going to be down as well. We did talk to Berkheimers, who is our EIT tax collection company. They said that we will definitely see a loss in the 2019-2020 school year. And the reason for that is due to the final returns that have been extended until July. So most of the people that are filing their final returns, they actually have till July to file them now. So if that's the case, we're not going to see any of that money in this school year. We're not going to see it till next school year. And next school year, if they have the ability to pay it, are they holding off filing it because they've lost their job and they don't have the money? So that is a question as well, if they actually do return to employment. We were told that the first quarter EIT, they don't feel it will be drastically affected. In other words, people were still working, so the EIT money is going to be there. But the question comes to, are the employers going to be unable to pay it? So basically, are they going to be able to file it? Will they file it on time? And second of all, are they businesses that eventually never reopen? They're currently closed, they never reopen. And will we ever then collect on that EIT tax that was sitting out there that they collected and then they never turn over to us? Second quarter is what they feel will be the most effective due to the layoffs, because obviously your second quarter is April, May, and June. They estimate we're looking at probably, they're thinking probably roughly about 30% of our residents will have no taxable income. And if that happens, based on their recommendation, they're saying that we should probably see a 15% reduction in our collections for EIT, which is about $225,000 to the district. The next one is assessment appeals and tax appeals. As it gets to the time where people start having hardships and they start having problems making their taxes, they tend to see if they can have their properties reassessed. If their properties are reassessed and the assessment goes down, then we're going to see a reduction. This is kind of an unknown. We really don't know how many people will file for reassessments. It's a if. We really have no idea what's going to happen in this realm. The people who are going to be affected more by this are your people like Whitehall's, your bigger school districts who have huge industry and things like, think of MacArthur Road, all those businesses on MacArthur Road that have been closed. And if businesses do not reopen, they're probably going to be the people who are going to most file for their assessment appeals through the business end realm and end of things. So they're the people that I think are going to see more of a hit in this than we will, but we could see a hit in this as well. Next is, of course, our interest rates. As I talked to you earlier, you can't have low interest borrowing rates and high investment rates. 18-19, we estimated, or we had $270,000 in interest earnings. 200 this year, I am going to end up at 220,000 in interest. Talking to our financial advisors, they are basically telling us it's continuing to decline. Zero interest, as I said, is good for borrowing, but it's not good for investment rates. Not a good time at all for short-term investments. They said you want to look back to the last recession and see what kind of interest rates you were getting, and that's probably what you're going to be looking at again. I looked back on an average, we were making about $35,000 a year in interest during those times. So I backed those rates back as well. So you're looking at, I probably almost about 80% reduction in our interest. I took that $250,000 back to $35,000. And then lastly, we have the state and the federal. So will we get in the basic ed funding and the special ed funding what we were told we would get in 2021? The state revenue is a shortfall currently of $4 billion due to COVID-19, which is minimally a 10 to 12% decrease in their revenues. 75% of the state revenue comes from the personal income tax and the SUT tax, which is the sales and use tax. Stores are closed. The only ones open are the only retail stores really are grocery stores. And obviously a lot of that is non-taxable stuff. You do have your Targets and your Walmarts for some of their taxable stuff, but it's not a lot. It's not big businesses that are open for taxing. Things like car sales, they were closed for a month. For every $30,000 car that somebody is buying is 6% tax that's going to the state. Not to mention title fees, registration fees, emissions fees, state inspection fees, all that goes, a state gets a portion of that. They're not getting that. So that's all hurting their revenue stream as well. State is looking at redoing their budget on a 6-month budget. So Governor Wolf is in the same boat we are. This hit and now he needs to revise everything. He's talking about a 6-month budget. Talking about a 6-month budget so that he can turn around then and look at his revenues and decide what he can do for the remainder of the year, which scares business managers, because if he says we're going to get this much money in this 6-month budget, but then he doesn't have it to give it to us, what's going to happen in the second half of the year? So again, we have to build a 12-month budget on what we think we're going to get, and we're not sure. For that reason, I have built the budget in status with what we were given last year, hoping he would not go under that. Talking again about the tax freeze, he is not up for re-election. He has completed all of his terms, so he cannot be re-elected. He has been a friend to education. So some business managers feel that if they do pass and it goes to him for signature, that he would probably end up vetoing that because of that very reason, that he is a friend to education. So we'll have to see what actually comes out of that. And then again, could we see the same type of stuff on the federal level? What's going to happen with our grants? They've given all this stimulus money. How are they sustaining all of this? These concerns are the budgets that we face on the revenue side of things. And the total cuts that I have done to the revenues this year is $750,000 on a loss in revenues. Any questions?
Sherry, so what you're saying in essence is you've taken off the 172,000, the potential frac freeze, the 456. You've already pulled that from the budget.
I did not do the tax increase. We are presenting you a budget with the 3.5% tax increase in it.
That's still in it. Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
That is if it's a that's why I said potential tax freeze would be a potential loss to us. Correct.
Right. But the budget you've built has the 456 in it, correct?
You got it.
Okay. And then one other quick thing, you said reduction of VIT collections, 15%.
Yes.
Are you talking for the second quarter or for the year, 15%?
Overall next year, I did a 15% reduction for the entire year.
For the entire year. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yep. You're welcome. All right, Matt, you can advance. So this is what our current fund balance looked like for the July 1st of this year. And this is the fund balance that you approved in the board agenda in November. We anticipated using 2.7 million out of fund balance. I'm thinking we're probably going to use around 1.2, but that does not take in, as I talked to you about, Brandywine Transportation. So if he and we end up coming up with an agreement, that's going to be more fund balance I'm going to have to use this year to cover the remaining costs there. Any questions? All right, Matt, you're up.
So as you recall, back in, it would have been probably about this time in 2018, we started coming up with a long-term project planning and facility planning kind of worksheet. Number of the things we've already completed. We've completed the science rooms and labs at the high school. We completed the high school furniture for the science rooms. We completed upgrading all of our network switches, and we've completed the middle school classroom tile floors. Up next for the 2020-2021 school year, we were looking at recommending furniture replacement at the middle school, replacing the large utility shed or the pole building down by the field house. We are looking at crack repair and seal coating at the field house stadium parking lot, and the same for the Peters parking lot. We're also looking at replacing the little dump truck, which you know that we've been having issues with, and it's at this point basically held together by Band-Aids. We are recommending now administratively, we are recommending everything in red that we place on hold and we do not consider for this upcoming budget as part of this upcoming budget. So that would be removing, you know, the furniture replacement, the utility shed, pole building, and the parking lot repairs down here at the stadium and over at Peters Elementary School. We don't feel that it would be appropriate to move forward with those projects at that time. At this time, we are recommending that we replace that little dump truck because that is used so heavily, especially during the winter months, for snow removal and for salting of all of our parking lots. We have zero confidence that the truck that we have now will make it through another season like that. The rest of the projects remain the same, and we didn't bump back the years that they were initially scheduled in. However, we just kind of want put out there, we're going to have to take a look at this list every single year moving forward, because we fully anticipate that the impact of the expected recession that we're going to go into because of the pandemic is going to be a multi-year process, and we're going to have to reprioritize this list each year. That being said, are there any questions on our recommendation for the 2020-2021 list that you see in front of you? Okay, hearing none, we will move forward into the district expenses versus revenues, and we'll hand that back over to Sherry.
All right, so our district expenses versus revenues, we are looking at our expenditures of $35,832,687. And if you see, we have no property in there, and that would be a lot of our stuff that we use for fund balance. So that if the pole barn or that stuff we would have done, that would have been showing up in there. So we are doing none of that kind of stuff this coming school year. Local revenues, that local revenue at $18,979,173, that does have a $455,000 tax increase in it. That is built into the budget already, leaving us with a $33,343,000 for revenues, leaving our budget at a shortfall of $2.4 million. Any questions?
And Sherry, can you clarify again, what is the tax increase that you have there?
Sure, it's 3.5%, and that is, it generates $455,000 in revenue.
Thank you.
And that's our adjusted index, correct, Sherry?
That is correct. That's our adjusted index at a 92.75 collection rate. Had it been the 93.75, we would be collecting $172,000 more.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. I can read your mind, Matt.
Sherry, previously
One
you
of
had
us has
told
been
us
here
what
too
the
long. I
average.
don't know, but
I'm sorry, Sherry, you had told us before what the average amount of a taxpayer's bill would go up. Do you have that again?
Donna, I have that in another slide, and I'll walk you through that then.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, hearing no other questions, go ahead, Matt.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, okay, so our expenses, it's basically a pie chart. 63% of our district budget is salaries and benefits, and the other 37% is basically not salary and budget benefits, but I'm not going to say they're not fixed cost either, because a large portion of that is reoccurring fixed costs as well. We have to pay for electricity. We have to pay for fuel. Unless you want to stop school district transportation and have a mutiny on your hands, you're going to want to continue on with school district transportation. Utilities, things like phone, water, sewage. Charter schools, we can't not pay our charter schools. Speech and occupational therapy, we have to pay for speech and occupational therapy. Our debt service payments, all of that is all included in that 37 other percent, and it's all costs that we really don't have any control over as well per se. So it's hard. It's hard when we look at these budget times and we're losing that kind of revenue of where are we going to make this up in expenditures to reduce, when most of the stuff we cannot cut and we cannot reduce. Next slide, Matt. So again, this is the revenue pie chart. So we're looking at, I don't know why that keeps clearing out on us. That is fund balance is 7%. Local revenue is the 53%. And that makes up 60% of our total local revenues, make up 60% of our budget. And then you see 38% is state and 2% is federal. Next slide, Matt. So here's the big picture. So we have our expenditures and we have our revenues, 35 million expenditures, 33 million in revenues. Our shortfall is 2.4 million. Of that budget shortfall and taking it out of fund balance, every year you have a commitment in there in our fund balance to use for PCERS increases. That's $168,000. Healthcare increases, $155,000 is also in there. So our additional amount to balance the budget that we need is 2.1 million. And again, just as a reminder, we have built the budget with that 3.5% tax increase in it. So if we look at the ending fund balance at the end of the 2021 school year, if we use all of the $2.4 million in fund balance, we'll end with a fund balance of 6.2 next year. Next slide. All right, so this is what our fund balance will look like for next year. If we are currently in June 2020, I'm anticipating at that point in time, we're going to end with about an 8.7. So this is where we'll earmark our money for next school year. And in that is the 2.4, that yellow box is what we're planning on using to balance our fund balance, or to balance our budget between our revenues and our expenditures for this coming school year. Next slide. So we cannot increase taxes over the 3.5%, which is $455,000. And that includes, as I said before, the reduction to the collection rate of 92.75%. Annual tax increase on a median assessed home at 3.5%. Lehigh County median assessed value home this year is $149,000. That home would see a tax increase of $137. Northampton County's $45,850, and they would see a $20 increase in their tax bills. So why is Lehigh County tax increases so much compared to Northampton County? Simple answer, dual county assessment and STEB market values. So again, dual county school districts must equalize mills between two counties by using STEB market value data, rebalancing each year. So the next slide is going to show you how that happens, and you're going to be able to see why it looks like it does. So
Sherry, do you want to just define what the STEB is for our participants that may not know?
Sure, State Tax Equalization Board. So what they do is they take counties that, school districts that have dual counties, and the assessment office reports to them the amount of houses that sold throughout a year's given time, and how much the property was assessed at, and how much it was sold at. And they make their own, they come up with their own assessed value for those properties. So if you look at 2019-20 at the top, Lehigh County last year gave us an assessment of $655,000 or $1 million. The millage rate for last year was 22.539, and we realized revenues of $14.7 million. Northampton County is a little over $42 million in assessed value. Their millage rate was 66.0122. Their tax revenue would have been 2.7. So you add the 14.7 and the 2.7, and you get 17.5. That is our tax levy. So what happens from that then is they take off of the top of that, then they minus out the property tax relief that we get every year from the state gambling. And then that gives us a dollar amount. And then that dollar amount then is multiplied by our tax collection rate, which last year would have been 93.5%. 93.75%. And that gave us $15.5 million in collections. So now what they do is they take the STEB market value, and they take, if you notice, STEB falls 2 years behind. So last year they used the 2017 rates. This year they have to use the 2018 rates for the 2020 assessed values. So if you look at the 2007 for Lehigh County, it was $570 million. For 2018, it's $584 million. That's an increase of over $14 million in our STEB market value from the State Tax Equalization Board. Northampton County was $107 million. They went down to $106, decrease of $1.2 million. So overall, there's a $15 million swing in that STEB market value between the two counties. So basically what's happening is Northampton County paid more. When this works out, Northampton County paid more last year than they should have. So Lehigh County makes that up this year based on the STEB market values. So what you have to do is go down underneath the percent of market value. You have Lehigh County, you take A, which is the STEB market value of the 584,000, and you divide that by the total between of the STEB market value for both counties, and you get a percentage. So Lehigh County's percentage should have been 84.56%. Northampton County's should have been 15.43%. So then you take the the market value in one and the 6913, and you multiply that by the total revenue, the total assessed revenue of the 65,975. So you take the 84.567% and you multiply it by that assessed value for Lehigh at 655, you get 14,582,000. Northampton County 17,710. Gives you again that tax levy of the 17,562,000, and then they need to rebalance it. So then you need to take the rebalanced taxed revenue and you divide that by the assessed value, and you get that last year, for this year's, based on this year's numbers, last year should have been 22.64, and we were at 22.51. If you add the multiply that by 3.5%, you're going to get 23.43%, which is how the system works out on PDE. So STEBS reports all this information to PDE. They plug it into their system. We have no control over that. PDE plugs that in directly from the information that they get from STEBS. Northampton County's does not change, because if you would do that, it's going to come out less. It'll come out at 64 point and change. So because of that, there's area in there where Lehigh County or Northampton County doesn't climb, and Lehigh County does, because Lehigh County should have paid more. So Lehigh County maxes out at 3.5%, and Northampton County is only at 0.67%. So they're only going up 0.67% because last year their millage rate should have been, based on the new numbers, 64.045. I know it's confusing and
So
I hate it.
I'm actually going to go back a slide just to circle back around to Mrs. Culp. Mrs. Culp, you had asked a question earlier. Does this slide answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any questions on the formulas that Mrs. Molitoris just went through? Okay, hearing none.
So potential additional revenues not in current budget. So again, the governor's proposed budget had a basic education subsidy of $32,578 in it. That is not currently in the budget because we're unsure what's going to happen with that. Special education subsidy is $27,000. Again, we're not 100% sure what's going to happen with that. So we built it with the same basic ed subsidy payments that we received this year. We did just receive notice earlier on today that they have redone those numbers in the 2021 budget because of the, the 1920 budget based on the basic ed formula and the special ed formula that kind of changes all year long. And it looks like we're going to see about an $8,000 increase in basic ed and $15,000 increase in special ed. So that was a little bit to the positive, but that's based on that basic ed and special ed formula that changes every year about this time once they finalize numbers from the prior year. Transportation subsidy, again, if we renegotiate that Brandywine agreement, no matter what that comes in to be, that will be revenue that I'll be able to put back into this general fund budget because we will receive our transportation subsidy at full. Right now, I only have it based on the 125 days that we currently have paid for our transportation. And that's all we can apply for at this point in time unless we renegotiate the contract with Brandywine. So if all of these come to fruition, we're looking at about a $360,000 more I can put back in on revenue side of things. Go ahead, Matt. So administrative recommendations, again, we're recommending that you approve the 3.5 tax increase to generate that $450,000 in additional revenue. The board can consider, so the state has not made any kind of definite yet on what they're doing, whether they're doing a tax freeze, whether they're saying, let's extend that discount period, let's extend that face period. But it is also actually a local decision. So locally, the board can decide, we're going to raise taxes, but we're going to give our taxpayers a longer time to pay it and pay it not facing any other penalties. If the board would decide to do something along these lines, we would probably need some kind of a board motion in order to do that. If we do that, we would recommend that you would put language in there that if the tax freeze would come into play, that this would be null and void because it would be a double whammy on the school district. This is just, in our opinion, to be offered to the taxpayers if we are allowed to raise our taxes. Again, we are going to continue to evaluate and renegotiate that contract with Brandywine to see where that falls out. We're going to continue to look at opportunities to decrease expenditures and or increase revenues as more information becomes available on funding through the CARES Act. For those of you who were around during ARA, what had happened during the ARA time was they basically gave us the funds, but they subsidized it with basic ed funding. So they kind of took away our basic ed funding and subsidized this with it. So a lot of business managers are very scared that this is not going to be new monies. It's going to be offset somewhere in the basic ed funding. We're hoping to know more before the end of June. We're hoping that this gets finalized. This is the money that he just applied for the other day, that $523 million that he has to use 90% on charter schools and public schools. So if he does do that, I think he's going to probably have to have a game plan in place on what's going to happen to that money and how people are going to get it and how it's going to roll down the school district. So we're hoping before we pass the budget to have more information on that. And if we are able, if we do find out it is not going to be an offset to basic ed subsidy, it could potentially be an increase that we can put in our budget for next year. And again, our last recommendation then is to use the additional deficit for the 2021 out of fund balance of the 2.487, which is again includes that 3.5% tax increase in there. If we didn't have the tax increase, we'd be looking at almost 2.9 million dollars in fund balance coming out of fund balance. So I believe that's it. Questions?
I have a question,
Well,
Sharon.
that was
Sure.
a lot of things. And when we finally, after we have the questions answered, then can we review again what we need to look at for our the board meeting? Okay.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Bob.
All right, thanks, Sherry. Two questions.
Mm-hmm.
What, and looking ahead,
Mm-hmm.
looking at contract negotiations with various groups, what do we have coming up, let's say in the next 2 years?
Sure. Next year is teaching staff, I believe, is next year. And then the year after that is custodial maintenance and clerical and admin.
Okay. And secondly, at what point in time, as we start using our fund balance, this will be, it's only my second budget, but we're getting it critically low. What would you consider like the no cross line point of our fund balance? I mean, at what point do we start looking at some drastic things instead of, constantly taking away from that?
I agree. I would not want to see fund balance go any lower than 7 million. I don't want it to get into the sixes. When you're looking at a $37 million budget, $7 million is only going to take us about a fifth of the way through the school year, and we're going to be done.
Exactly.
And that's a huge issue. I mean, if he talks about a 6-month budget, I'm going back a couple of years ago now. Bob, you were probably still in administration. We didn't have a budget until January.
Yeah,
it was our fund balance that kept us afloat. Had we not had that fund balance, we were not making payroll. There were school districts that had to go out and get loans that didn't have fund balance. So yeah, it's going to get to the point in the next 2 years where we're going to need to start looking at drastic cuts and what we can do to staff or whatever that we need to in order to make these budgets, to make these revenues more equal our expenditures. You are correct, 100% correct.
Yeah, I'm starting to get frightened, and obviously we're not alone. Everybody's in the same boat.
Right.
But, looking at our finances and contract negotiations coming up,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There aren't any easy answers, I guess. Thank you.
You're welcome. Matt, did you want to weigh in?
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that we need to look at our biggest cost drivers, and a lot of that work is done through our contracts and agreements with all groups,
Mm-hmm.
all of our employee groups. So I think we need to be engaged in those conversations and just make sure that everybody's looking at the same information along the way,
Mm-hmm.
and that involves a lot of communication. The next part of it is that everything, including that long, so there's the personnel side, but then there are some of the costs that we can control, and we're already starting to recommend that right in with this year's budget recommendation. There are just simply projects that we're going to have to put on hold that we most likely would have been able to do. They're going to have to be taken off the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I may, Sherry, I have a question, excuse me, a question and a comment.
Sure.
You said you were talking to our financial people. Have you been looking at all about the possibility of refinancing any of our bonds at this point in time? And what kind of information are you getting on that?
I have not at this point in time, but it is on my radar. But I was one of keeping that. I'm going to say Matt as my ace in the hole to maybe look at that for next year when we could see more drastic cuts coming in the 21-22 school year. So what can I do about my refinancing to get those $3 million bond payments down to maybe something that's a little more palatable?
I would think that interest rates now are at a, I don't know how long, all-time low, and it would seem like this might be a time to be, if not moving forward, at least getting some information on that.
I would be more than
who knows
willing
where
to
rates
look
will be
into that.
6 months from now. We might be right back where we started, and then we have nothing to gain. Where if we do something now, and I don't know, I haven't spoken to anyone,
Right.
but it might be a possibility to move forward on that. Like you said, we're losing $200,000 on our revenue side because
Right.
interest rates are down. So maybe we can make some of that up anyway with decreased income payments on the bond. Excuse me.
And you are correct. So I will definitely reach out to them tomorrow and see what they can tell me. Yep.
What are you doing tonight? What's your hurry? No, I'm only kidding. And I guess the other thing I would say is it seems to me like there's a lot of real uncertainties in this whole budget from top to bottom. What affects the loss of income is going to have? What's going to happen with the state government? Is the federal government going to contribute anything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But it seems to me like we've cut the expenses to the extent that we can, and the variable at this point will be if those things don't happen, we'll wind up taking more money out of our fund balance. If, on the other hand, they do happen or the bad ones don't happen, we won't spend as much money on our fund balance. For example, I think you said you budgeted a little over $2 million this year, and you spent about $1.1 million. So we actually did not spend $1 million of that in this year's budget. A whole bunch of reasons for that. I understand that. But if we go forward to next year, we'll be in the same situation. Worst case scenario, we might spend that whole fund balance to complete the budget. But if any of the good things happen and the bad things don't happen, we won't spend near as much of that fund balance. So to me, that's the big variable. So,
Exactly.
I would be comfortable moving ahead with it. I would be comfortable with the tax increase. Obviously, we need to keep an eye on the future, but that's going to be the variable to me, how much money we take out of the fund balance, and that's where we're going to go. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
This is Gary. And, those are going to be some of my comments. Thank you, Matt, for doing that, because I think we're in a position that we really don't know where we're going. And I think in the history of us, we've kind of used that fund balance up front and not had to use it. So I think right now, I want to thank everyone for doing what they did to put this together. I know you have a lot of work ahead of you to maintain it and to keep correcting it. And I agree with Matt. I support it.
I have a question, and it's I think it's for Gary and for Sherry and whoever. So right before all this COVID stuff happened, we had started negotiating contracts with 2 groups that are up this year. Are any of the potential changes that we discussed, Sherry and Matt and Rhonda, are they included in these numbers?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
No, they are included. All things that you have discussed are included in the current budget numbers.
Okay, even though I know that
Yeah.
obviously we don't have
I
any.
would remind you that we're in a public meeting here, and I don't know if this is proper discussion at this time for a public meeting. Just
Right.
throwing that
Yeah.
on the
I think it
table.
got to end. I was going to interject.
Okay.
We can't really answer that right now.
Got it.
I'm sorry, Michelle, but I think we got to stay away from that at this point in time in a public meeting. Talking about a negotiation process that's ongoing.
Oh, no,
I'm
that's
sorry.
fine. I just wanted to know that it was in there or not.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions from school board members this evening?
I don't have a question. I just want to make a comment as well. I don't believe, the girls are doing a fantastic job of getting everything all lined up, but we don't know what the future is going to bring. And hopefully fortunately, we're not the only ones that are looking at this situation. So I'm all in favor for the proposed budget myself.
Is there any objection from any of the board members to proceed?
Do we need
I don't hear any, Matt, so I would say we would go. I'm sorry?
Sorry, I just have one more question. When we were discussing the tax increase and extending the amount of time that taxpayers have to pay that increase, that's not something that we need to decide. When would we need to decide that option?
We would need to decide that by the final budget, so we could make that decision in June. So it's something that we could talk about at our finance committee meeting and see if they make that recommendation. And then at that point in time, we would move it to the board for approval.
Okay.
And that way we would probably have some direction, a little more direction from the state as to what the Senate and House will be doing, right?
That's our hopes.
Right.
That's our hope.
And you'll see, Mr.
Right.
Fedorch, in a bit when we're
Very
done
shortly.
when we're done discussing the budget, that we have an idea to share out with you for scheduling of the June meetings to get us as much time as possible to make a best informed decision.
Yeah, good, because as we know, our Senate and House don't move too quickly.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And I did say that in a public meeting, so I'm sorry.
Any other school board members that would like to either question or comment on the presentation from this evening?
Yes, one last thing. This is Bob again. Obviously, we had some retirees. I'm sure we took a look at personnel as well, because I noticed that we're looking at staying status quo, and based on our enrollment numbers, it probably makes sense. That's my first question. That was obviously taken a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know even if we fully replace the retirees, we anticipate some savings because we would be bringing in professionals at a lower level on the pay scale.
Right.
But the variable there is, is the person retiring going out on single benefits, and is the person coming in on double or family? So sometimes we don't actually know that until the person's approved and fill out their benefits paperwork.
Okay. And then lastly, I'm acceptable what I saw. I mean, obviously a lot of question marks, but obviously I fully support what we're doing and what we need to do. One comment I will make though, I saw that, repairing the macadam at various parking lots, if we neglect it long enough, it's going to end up costing us a big bill in the end. It might be something, maybe we could do something in-house on some of maybe some major cracks. I don't know what they look like, but something that we don't want to neglect because it's going to end up costing us a lot of money on the back end.
Absolutely. And we've been having that discussion here kind of internally. Mr. Durr, I don't know if you want to weigh in on the current state of those two identified parking lots.
Yes, they are, they're both around 5 or 6 years old, and there are no major cracks or potholes or anything like that. It's just a routine maintenance to extend their life. So no large cracks, no potholes, nothing like that. It's just a life extension type project.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, one last call for any other board members before we discuss upcoming meetings. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to exit out of this screen here. Maybe. And so kind of mentioned this already a little bit. We know that we have missing information yet to fully, make a recommendation to the school board for a final budget. This, as it appeared this evening, it will go to the Monday agenda for approval of a proposed preliminary budget. The next meeting in June is actually scheduled, it would be for June 8th. One of the ideas that we had here administratively was kind of two options. We have our June 8th meeting to further discuss the budget, so we could have the finance committee meeting in June, have the regular scheduled board meeting in June, but not move to approve the budget at that time. We could schedule a special meeting for later in June because we won't even have the fuel bids in until June 11th. And we also expect that information will be released through June from the legislature and from the governor's office. So we could add another meeting Or we could reschedule the June 8th meeting, and we're looking at June 22nd as a date that we could potentially have it later in June, hopefully have more information to make a better informed decision. And June 22nd would give us enough time to print the tax bills and get them out. So we'll kind of open that for discussion.
Matt, this is Gary.
Sure.
If we postpone the meeting till June 22nd, would that be too long for us to make some other decisions? Because if we're just looking at the budget itself, calling a special meeting for June 22nd, to me, looking at it on the onset, unless you can tell me something different, would be the way to go, to keep our meeting on the June 15th. No, I'm sorry, 8th, and then having a special one. I mean, I don't know. When I say that, I don't know how much we would have on that agenda, and how much we should probably do early in June rather than waiting till the 22nd.
Right. So yeah, and that's a great question. We could do, I guess, what I'll call our traditional agenda business for June 8th. Take another look at the budget, and then the special meeting, would most likely be an agenda topic of one, the budget.
I can be a real popular guy at this point in time, and I think we should have the June 8th meeting, because there's so many things that are changing on a regular basis, and to put it off till the end of June might be detrimental to our long range planning. So I think we should go ahead with the June meeting, and then have another meeting at the end of June, whatever date you want to do, 22nd, to strictly talk about finalizing the budget. But if we can make changes and move forward at the June 8th meeting on the budget, I think that's a good idea. Since I want to be a real popular guy, I would say, if you even want to call a July meeting, because there's so much changing, the legislature is coming up with new rules and regs every day, and if there's a need to have a July meeting to keep us comfortable over the summer with the changing process, I would be willing to go to that. Not saying you have to, but something you might want to put on your radar screen to think about even having another meeting in July.
Yeah. And I personally would not be opposed to that at all. We're kind of doing them remotely anyway. And at the very least, it may give us an opportunity to kind of see somewhat how hopefully some of the dust has settled by then. And we can say, okay, this is what we're actually going to implement with the approved budget that just occurred in June. So I would not be opposed to that. Ultimately, it's a board decision. I think the July decision we can hold off on until June.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I agree with holding it off till then. I'm making sure that we need it, and truthfully, I think we're probably going to need that July meeting. But if we can get the business done on the 8th of June 1st, so that we just come into the budget, because that could still be a lengthy discussion, depending on what the state is giving directives and where we really are. I think we could then just have a special meeting in June, and then hold off on a recommendation for a July meeting. We're probably all going to be home anyway.
I'm not suggesting we schedule at this point, Matt or Gary. I'm just suggesting that it's something I would be open to taking a look at it, should the need arise, with everything that's changing on a regular basis right now. And we might find out July 1st that we're not going to open school in fall. Who knows where this is going to go at this point. So I'm just saying it's something I'm open to.
I agree with that.
Something to keep in mind, and Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, but you cannot spend anything. We would not be able to spend anything or pay any bills in July until you approve the budget.
Right, but I don't think they're talking about not approving the budget till July. A budget has to be approved by June 30th. So that they're going to do on the 22nd. And then they're just saying get together to meet to talk about any other changes that might be coming down the road.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Yep, that's my understanding as well.
I think we're just putting out a feeler to see and keeping July open, that there's a potential. We'd have to have an approval by the board. We'd have to put it out to the public, but I think we need to keep in our mind that we may need a July meeting.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm looking for direction then as far as for the June. I think I'm hearing consensus, but I have not heard from all the board members on this evening about keeping the June 8th meeting and then scheduling a meeting for June 22nd in case we need it to make, a final decision on the upcoming budget.
Is there anyone who objects to having both meetings? Anyone object to having both meetings?
I think Mrs. Martineau was about to ask a question.
No, I was just going to say, if you've been looking at the comments, the rest of us are all agreed. I don't see
I'm
any
sorry.
objections.
I can't see that screen when I'm sharing my other screen.
Oh, yeah, that's what I figured. But I don't see any objections from the rest of us.
Yeah,
this
is Gary. I don't
I
see
agree.
anything. I'm on the phone.
I agree. This is
Yeah, I
Bob.
can't either. I agree.
Okay, Matt, I think we should go ahead with posting for a June 22nd meeting, and we'll continue with the 8th, and we'll certainly have a meeting next week.
Okay, not hearing any objections. I don't see that every school board member has weighed in on that or heard from it, but I'm not hearing any.
This is Robin. I'm all in favor with it. I also sent you a comment as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Hey, Matt, it's Donna. I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Bob. It's good to go.
Okay, Mr. Keegan, I don't know if I heard from you yet.
Matt, I think he signed off a while ago.
Oh, geez. Okay. Okay, well, then that's the plan. We will get that posted and have it shared out that we're going to hold a special meeting on June 22nd. And we will have further discussion about a potential July meeting. The budget as presented tonight is what you will be voting on Monday night. That is the preliminary budget, and we are allowed to change it after Monday evening's vote. Any questions on any of that? Okay, hearing none, I will turn it back over to Mrs. Culp as our chairperson to open it up for anything else or to close the meeting.
Does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss?
I do want to make another comment. I think we have to have that budget, because don't we need a 30-day period of approval after the preliminary before we have a final? So even if we would approve it this Monday, we wouldn't have 30 days by June 8th. So we do need to postpone or have a budget approval meeting sometime beyond that, if I'm not incorrect. So
that's correct,
Matt.
We need 30 days to post it.
Need to post it 30 days. Yeah. Okay.
That's correct. Matt?
Okay,
Matt Link?
Yes.
You're okay then with everything?
Yep, I have my direction here, and I'm just putting some notes into the agenda, and we will make sure that we have it posted for public review after Monday evening, and I think that covers all of our topics this evening.
Okay. All right. Well then, Donna, do you want to call for a motion to adjourn? But before you do that, I just want to, as I always think about, is that please, everyone and your families, stay safe and stay healthy. And Matt, from all of us, our condolence to you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody's support, and so does my family. Thank you.
This is Donna. Hearing no other questions or concerns, we adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Be
Matt.
safe.
Good night, everyone.
Mr. Link, are you still there? No.